Most parents want their children to succeed. They want them to be safe, loved, and happy. But sometimes love crosses a line. Sometimes a mother becomes so emotionally attached to her son that she struggles to let him become an independent adult. The result is what many people call a mama's boy. Now, before we begin, it's important to say that loving your mother is not a problem. In fact, strong family bonds are often healthy and beneficial. The issue arises when a grown man remains emotionally dependent on his mother in ways that interfere with adulthood, relationships, decision-making, and personal growth. Today we're going to explore how this dynamic develops and why some mothers struggle to let go, what happens when these sons enter the real world, how it affects marriages and relationships, and what can happen when the mother who has always been at the center of his life is suddenly gone. So what is a mama's boy? The term mama's boy is often used jokingly, but psychologists recognize that excessive parental attachment can create real challenges. A mama's boy is generally a man whose emotional connection to his mother remains unusually strong and dependent long after childhood should have ended. He may rely on her approval before making decisions. He may prioritize her feelings above those of his spouse or partner. He may struggle with independence because his mother has remained his primary emotional support system. In many cases, these men are not weak, unintelligent, or incapable. Some are highly successful professionals. The problem is that emotionally they may still be seeking the comfort, validation, and protection they received as children. Their mother often occupies a position that no romantic partner can realistically compete with. The emotional umbilical cord was never fully cut. So how does this develop? Most mothers love their sons deeply, yet only some relationships become unhealthy. Why? Often the answer lies in emotional needs. A mother who feels lonely, neglected, trapped in an unhappy marriage, divorced, widowed, or lacking emotional fulfillment elsewhere may unconsciously turn her son into a substitute emotional companion. The son becomes more than a child. He becomes her confidant, her protector, her source of emotional validation. This process is rarely intentional. In fact, many mothers believe they are simply being loving and supportive. The son learns that pleasing his mother earns affection and approval. Disappointing her creates guilt. Over time, he may become conditioned to prioritize her emotional needs above his own. Another factor is overprotection. Some mothers become convinced that the world is dangerous and that nobody can care for their son properly except them. They solve every problem, make every decision, remove every obstacle. As a result, the son never develops confidence in his own ability to navigate life independently. One of the most recognizable signs of this dynamic is the belief that no woman is good enough for the son. Where does this come from? Partly, it comes from idealization. The mother remembers the little boy she raised, the child who loved her unconditionally, the child who depended on her. No future partner can compete with that emotional history. Sometimes there is also fear. A son's romantic partner represents change. If he falls in love, his attention naturally shifts. His priorities evolve. His mother may no longer be the most important woman in his life. For mothers who have built a large part of their identity around being needed by their son, this transition can feel threatening. As a result, girlfriends and wives may face constant criticism. Nothing they do is quite right. The cooking isn't right. The house isn't right. Their career choices aren't right. Their parenting isn't right. The issue is often not the woman herself. The issue is that she represents separation. And separation is precisely what the mother fears. Eventually, most men enter the wider world. Some leave home physically. Others remain emotionally tied to home even after moving away. The real world demands independence. Bills must be paid, problems must be solved, conflicts must be managed. People must learn to fail and recover. For the overly dependent son, this transition can be difficult. Some struggle with decision-making because they've always relied on someone else's judgment. Others become anxious when forced to operate without constant reassurance. Many discover that employers, partners, and friends expect personal responsibility. The world is not organized around protecting them. This can be a painful but necessary awakening. Some men adapt and grow, others retreat back into dependence. The impact on relationships and marriage, this is often where the consequences become most visible. Healthy marriages require emotional separation from parents, not abandonment, not rejection, separation. The spouse must become the primary partner. But for some mama's boys, this shift never fully happens. When conflicts arise between wife and mother, the mother wins. When decisions need to be made, the mother is consulted first. When emotional support is needed, the mother remains the first call. This creates a painful triangle. The wife begins to feel like a third wheel in her own marriage. Resentment grows, arguments become more frequent, trust begins to erode. Some wives attempt to replace the mother. They cook, clean, organize, remind, nurture, and manage every aspect of the man's life. But this usually creates another unhealthy dependency. Others attempt to change him through confrontation. This rarely works by itself. Real change only occurs when the man recognizes the problem and chooses adulthood. The healthiest path is not for the wife to become a replacement mother. It is for the husband to become a fully functioning adult. This means accepting responsibility, making independent decisions, setting boundaries, and developing an identity separate from his mother. While no one ever admits to being a mama's boy, we all know one. Sometimes we see them as funny characterizations on TV or read about them in books and such. But identifying one on a universal stage is often subject to interpretation. One frequently discussed example is King Charles III of the United Kingdom. For much of his life, critics portrayed him as heavily influenced by his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. Whether that characterization was entirely fair is open to debate. Whether the Queen fully accepted that Diana was a suitable wife for her son is also open to debate. However, a clear stated fact is that she formally instructed her son to divorce Diana after Diana aired her grievances in a television interview in 1995. Even at his 50th birthday celebration, a public event, he referred to her as "Your Majesty, Mummy," a phrase he repeated on many occasions in later years. Even in his first national address as monarch, the newly crowned king spoke about his darling Momma during his inaugural speech. Before succession, commentators observed that Charles spent decades waiting under the shadow of a powerful parent whose influence shaped much of his public role. What makes this example interesting is that he eventually developed his own identity, while still maintaining what some would characterize as an unnatural bond to his mummy. He pursued environmental causes, charitable work, and public initiatives that became associated with him personally rather than simply with his mother. The English monarchy is a very tight-lipped institution, so even getting this level of insight into the ultimate mama's boy is extremely unusual and perhaps indicative of a connection that goes well beyond what was seen in the public eye. But what happens when the mother dies? One of the least discussed aspects of this dynamic is what happens when the mother is no longer there. For men who have built much of their emotional world around their mother, the loss can be devastating. Everyone grieves, but these men may experience something more profound. They lose their primary source of comfort, their advisor, their emotional anchor, their protector. Some become depressed, others feel lost. Some finally begin the process of emotional independence because they're forced to stand on their own. Ironically, growth sometimes occurs only after the relationship that prevented growth is gone. The healthiest outcome is when independence develops before such a loss occurs. That way, the mother remains loved and valued without becoming emotionally indispensable. How women can recognize the warning signs. If you're dating someone, there are often clues. Does he constantly seek his mother's approval? Does she interfere in decisions that should belong to the couple? Does he tell his mother things he won't tell you? Does he cancel plans because his mother demands attention? Does he become defensive whenever boundaries are discussed? One sign alone means little. A pattern matters. If you find yourself in a relationship with such a person, avoid becoming his replacement mother. Do not assume you can rescue, fix, or transform him. Instead, focus on healthy boundaries. Encourage independence. Encourage personal responsibility. And pay close attention to whether he is willing to grow. If he acknowledges the issue and actively works on it, there is hope. If he insists that everyone else is the problem while refusing to change, the future may be much more difficult, if even possible at all. Seek marriage guidance counseling if you find yourself in this situation. A mother's love can be one of the most powerful forces in a person's life. At its best, it creates confidence, security, and resilience. At its worst, it can unintentionally prevent a son from becoming fully independent. The goal is not separation from love. The goal is separation into adulthood. A healthy mother eventually raises a son who no longer needs her in the same way. And a healthy son learns that loving his mother and building an independent life are not competing goals. They are both part of growing up. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and let us know in the comments whether you've ever encountered this dynamic in real life. And once again, thank you for watching.